Hello, everyone coming in. Welcome. Seeing some familiar names. I'm about a minute from the top of the hour. I'll give maybe an extra minute to give some people some time to come in. I hope everybody's doing okay today. Happy Thursday or happy Friday Eve, whichever you want to call it. I prefer Friday Eve.
Same here.
Mhm. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just so you all know, this webinar is being recorded. My name is Keisha Johnson, and I am the project director for Weatherization Workforce Development here at NCAP, and it is wonderful to see all of you as we close out our six-part multifamily weatherization series. So throughout this series, we've covered every stage of multifamily work, from planning, coordination to communication, compliance, and beyond. And today we are wrapping it all up with a pretty bow with managing and closing out your first multifamily project. Multifamily projects take teamwork, crews, contractors, residents, all working in sync. So when it comes together, the results are powerful, efficient projects, strong partnerships, and lasting impacts in our communities. So before we get started, I just want to thank everyone who's been a part of this journey, our panelists, partners, everyone who's joined session after session. Your participation and shared insights have made this series such a success, and you are so appreciated. And so now I'll turn it over to Chase Counts with Greenbow Consulting, who has been our incredible partner throughout this effort. And Chase will introduce our panelists and guide us through today's discussion. So Chase, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keisha, and welcome back, everyone, to the final session of the Multifamily Weatherization series. This is session 6 of our 6-part series. Today, we're going to be focusing on managing and closing out your first project. And at this point, you've planned the work, you've built your team, you've launched your project, and now it's time to navigate the moving pieces, the field coordination, documentation, contractors, invoicing, and ultimately closeout. So think about this as a bridge between doing good work and proving it. This session was developed by National Community Action Partnership in cooperation with DOE's Office of State and Community Energy Programs. And just another disclaimer, the opinions and recommendations shared here reflect our experiences as practitioners, not DOE policy. So consider this an opportunity for some open discussion and some field-based insights from some leaders in the multifamily weatherization space. Before we get started, let's ground ourselves in why we do this work. Weatherization's mission is simple yet powerful: to reduce energy costs for low-income households while maintaining comfort and ensuring health and safety. A whole house approach means we treat the home as an interconnected system. That's especially true in multifamily buildings where energy savings, comfort, and safety depend on coordination across many units and many stakeholders. For folks here that have been with us the whole series, I You're probably tired of hearing from me, but just as a refresher, I'm Chase Counts, founder and principal at Greenbound Consulting, and we support organizations navigating and expanding energy affordability, primarily through weatherization. My background spans more than 15 years managing teams, programs, and partnerships to make these projects real for households that need them most. We're headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, and as always, I'm joined by my brilliant older sister, who will be helping us keep on pace and capture questions that may come up in the chat, and that's Jesse Counts. Our aim today is to share lessons learned so you can continue building out your multifamily weatherization operations. Next, uh, our we're having another roundtable, if I hadn't mentioned that before. And so our roundtable discussion from session 5 seemed to go over so well that we decided to do it again for session 6. So we have a great panel, some familiar faces, some new ones, and we'll get started with Megan McMillan, who leads Community Housing Partners, or CHP Energy Solutions, weatherization programs and services with 16 years experience in weatherization, starting as an administrative assistant. She's responsible for ensuring compliance, performance, and staff development across a portfolio of more than 20 programs, and her leadership reflects a blend of operational discipline and flexibility that we all need to make these projects successful. Next up, we have David Gates, who's a veteran energy auditor manager with Community and Economic Development Association, or CEDA, in Cook County, Illinois, one of the largest community action agencies in the country. With more than 25 years in the field, he's led large-scale retrofits, trained countless professionals, and continues to anchor his work in community service through his youth nonprofit, which again just kind of reflects the community-centered values that we all share in weatherization. Next, we have Ishraq Alsain, who is a multifamily project manager, also with CEDA, and a certified energy auditor with 6 years experience in weatherization. Prior to weatherization, she worked as an electrical engineer in Jordan, pursued a master's degree in renewable energy and energy efficiency, and led projects ultimately empowering households to generate their own electricity. Her work really reflects how data, design, and communication come together to make multifamily weatherization both efficient and impactful. Next, we have Wayne Thompson, who leads the weatherization and housing programs at Tri-County Opportunities in northwestern Illinois. He's been in the field for more than 45 years, from crew leader to energy auditor QCI, serving as weatherization director for the past 23 years. And I suspect he's seen nearly every version of how multifamily projects evolve with that kind of background. Wayne brings deep institutional knowledge and a pragmatic sense of what works when juggling contractors, crews, and clients. And last but certainly not least, EJ Janicki manages the Multifamily WAP program for Energy Outreach Colorado, or EOC, with nearly 8 years in weatherization total, ranging from county level intake staff in Illinois to state grantee experience at the Colorado Energy Office before joining Energy Outreach Colorado in 2024. She specializes in braiding funding streams and coordinating with the State Energy Office. She brings insight into how strategic partnerships and flexible funding can expand capacity for complex multifamily projects. And for folks that may not be aware, EJ has also been a contributor to the content of this series behind the scenes over the past few months, and really glad to have you out in front now. Few logistics before we get going. As Keisha mentioned, the session is being recorded. You'll receive a link afterward. Please use the chat or Q&A box for questions. We may be able to address some questions live and some others in a follow-up. You'll be able to earn BPI continuing education units for participating. And we will, in this case, we will not likely be taking a break. Based on the session, how the session went last time, we've got a lot of material to go through, a lot of experienced practitioners to hear from. So we'll likely just power through the break period. We noticed that last time we didn't have the gallery view quite set up right, so we're hoping when we stop sharing this presentation and get down to the round table that you'll be able to see all of the panelists instead of just who is speaking at the time. And then to our panelists, when you reach or when you launch into your first response, please let our audience know whether your multifamily operations are crew-based, contractor-based, or whether you take a hybrid approach. For today's agenda, here's what we're looking at. We'll start with a quick recap of session 5, then move on to our roundtable discussions covering project timelines and critical paths, resident communication and field coordination, contractor management and invoicing, and then closeout and quality control. So by the end, we hope you'll have a clear picture of how to bring a multifamily project full circle from launch to closeout. And with that, session 5 recap. Last session, we focused on planning and launching, things like documentation, intake, audits, and scope development. We also talked about managing access, coordinating with residents, and maintaining quality delivery. Today picks up right where we left off, how to manage all those moving parts once the work actually begins. So for session 6, by the end of this session, you'll be able to develop a realistic project timeline and critical path, manage communication, access, and data collection, oversee contractors, invoices, and performance standards, and then execute smooth, compliant closeouts that make both DOE and residents happy. In short, we're focusing on what it takes to finish well. All right, that's enough for me. We're going to kick things off with the first roundtable discussion. Planning is one thing, executing a project timeline that actually works in the field is another. Our panelists will share how they build their schedules, coordinate contractors, and keep everything moving on time. So I will stop sharing my screen. And hopefully we've got gallery view going and all of the panelists are visible. If not, please somebody let us know in the chat. And we're going to switch over to our first questions. And I'll tee this up for Sita initially, and maybe Ishraq would be the person to respond to this first. How do you begin building a project timeline once a multifamily project is approved? And what's your first step?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So once the project is being approved, basically we reach out to the contractor and request an unit schedule. Typically, the contractor put together the schedule based on their own base, whether and the size of the crew that's going to be on site each day. It varies based on that between 5 to 6 units or 7 units a day. And based on their unit schedule, we can figure out the timeline of the project.
Yeah, thank you, Ishraq. And David, anything to add to that?
All right. So just to add on that, CETA, we are a contractor-based organization instead of a crew. And like Ishraq was saying, um, when we initially start a project, we have a pre-construction meeting. During that pre-construction meeting, we obtain signatures for permits during that meeting. Once we get all of that squared away, we come up with a start date. Um, and that's based off how long it takes us to get a permit. Depending on where you're at and your permit process, sometimes in our case, we can get a permit in one day. Sometimes it might take you 2 or 3 weeks to get a permit. So depending on where you're located, that kind of determines when you get your permit. So you have to base everything off of when you obtain your permit. Once we get that permit, we have the contractor submit a schedule to us. They submit an initial schedule, and that schedule can consist of doing maybe 3 to 4 units a day. Once they get in and do those 3 or 4 units, they'll establish a pace, and they might be able to say, okay, now instead of doing 3 units a day, we can do 5 to 6 units a day. Then we have them submit us an updated schedule. Once we get that updated schedule, we submit that schedule to ownership, and ownership prepares notices to send to the tenants. So we have to give tenants 48 hours notice before we can enter their unit. So that's typically how we establish a timeline.
Great, thank you. And a quick follow-up on the critical path. You mentioned permits. Are there other components to that, identifying that critical path, approvals, pre-approvals, um, submission to the grantee for approval?
Yeah, so like I say, there's different levels to obtaining a permit. They have some municipalities, they have an easy permit process, and others have like a detailed permit process. So it can vary, depending on, where you're located, on how long that process can take. But typically, um, you'll be able to grow a relationship with the building department in your municipality, and they'll know when your contracts come across board and how to process them. So, I recommend, going down to your village hall or wherever you need to go, get to know the people that handles your permits. So when they come across their desk, they'll know what to expect and they'll process them more expeditiously for you. So it works out pretty well. But
Okay,
definitely get to know the people in your building department.
absolutely. For this next question, I think I'll direct it towards Megan at CHP. What tools or templates have been most helpful in developing and managing a timeline for multifamily weatherization projects?
Thanks, Chase. Good afternoon, everyone. And just so CHP, Community Housing Partners, we predominantly use crews for our multifamily weatherization. So again, it's gonna look different depending on the agency. We also predominantly do low-rise garden style multifamily projects. We don't do high rises or anything. And so I'm going to answer this in kind of two separate ways. One way is we have a great tool that we use. We use Microsoft Dynamics. We are able to kind of chart out the timeline for multifamily projects, utilizing that, entering data in regards to dates of, approximate start times, approximate timing for how long it's going to take per unit, per building, and when we expect to have the project done. Again, that works really well for us because, again, we have a lot more control over it because we use our own crews. The second part of my answer is going to be whatever works for that agency. I recognize that not all agencies have a dynamics, or they have access to or the ability to utilize more high-end tracking and timeline tools. Excel works beautifully. Using an Excel, I mean, put a big whiteboard on the wall. Track it out. You do whatever makes the most sense for your agency. What I would encourage is that you have something. Even if it's your first go at it, kind of having all the parties sit down, whether you're crew-based or contractor-based, whether it's it could be a low-touch project or you're replacing mechanical systems. Regardless, having everyone sit down that's involved to plot out and plan out what the expectation is for when timelines, when things should be completed. I think making sure all parties involved kind of go into this knowing if you go into it thinking, okay, we're going to be done in 30 days, and your contractor isn't planning on starting for 45, you have a problem. So making sure everyone is on the same page, I think is really important. And there's all kinds of tools out there that you can utilize. It just, again, it's whatever works best for your agency. And I would encourage anyone that's starting, Excel, go old school, put a whiteboard on the wall, plan it out, so everybody can see that all the time as well.
Yeah, hard to go wrong with Excel and a big old whiteboard. And that kind of teases it up nicely for our next question, which I'll direct to Wayne at Tri-County. Can you walk us through your typical order of operations? For example, how do you schedule crews and contractors so that they aren't working over one another?
Okay, we're predominantly a contractor-based agency for all of our projects, and certainly the multis are no different. But like Megan, we concentrate mainly on the low-rise multi-units. They're 3 stories or less, but we do some rather large ones. That being said, once we have our project descriptions approved and everything approved by our state grantees and things of that nature, and we're ready to start the work, we actually have a meeting as well, is like David mentioned. And what we do is we have the contractors join us on a walkthrough of all of the units. We'll have basically our preliminary work orders in hand, and we will have them come and walk through the units with us. And we have both the HVAC and the architectural guys there. And so this is one way to stop them working over or tripping over one another, if you will, because in some cases, like for instance, if we're HVAC is going to be installing ASHRAE fans, doing air sealing or different things of that nature up in the attic, we don't want the insulation crews, of course, up there blowing, several inches of insulation into the attic. So what we do is we literally go building by building, unit by unit, and do a quick walkthrough, make sure everyone is on the same page, and that we make sure that the contractors, of course, are familiar with each other. That's another big thing that we found. The contractors got to have a relationship between each other as well. So we don't want them just to be total strangers, walking into the units and not necessarily having that relationship. So we know that there's a lot of crossover. Again, we don't want the contractors in each other's ways. So after we do that initial walkthrough with both the contractors and the maintenance staff, which is a great help. We'll be talking about that more later, but you got to involve the maintenance folks of the building as well. And we just make sure that everyone knows their roles, and then we develop a timeline based on that. And again, we make sure they're talking to each other. So they'll talk to each other and say, hey, if you're going to start at this unit's over here, we'll start at this end, we'll meet in the middle, or just whatever it is, because each project, of course, is different. But communication is the key. Knowing that everyone's on the same page, exactly what work, who's going to be doing, and when they'll be doing it, eliminates a lot of that stuff. Just take care of those things right up front would be my best advice.
Yeah, quick follow-up question for you, Wayne, on that. When you have multiple contractors on site, do you have them all report into like a singular liaison on your team, or do they potentially have multiple points of contact at your organization?
Well, there are generally they'll report to me and or my inspection team or my direct assistant. So we want to make sure they have multiple points of contact, because of course I'm not always available, but we want to make sure that they do have contacts. So we give them multiple points of contact, including with the lead maintenance folks on the property.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. This next question, I'll direct to EJ. And have you developed any templates, checklists, or training materials to reduce documentation errors or gaps?
Sure. At Energy Outreach Colorado, or EOC, we only use a contractor model. We actually only have 2 full-time staff. And then we have a bunch of people that help us, but there's just myself and our project manager, Julie. And so when I came on, we already had some templates, and what we've done in the past year and a half is really beef those up so that we are set up to do everything. We have templates to ask for a certificate of insurance from contractors, the entire RFP process, I have a template for all of the invoices and costs we keep track of. My thought whenever we're doing something new or trying to review something that we have been doing is how can we make it easier on future EJ and Julie? Because that makes it easier on everyone else. And especially for our finance team, Wayne's right, communication is absolutely key. Making sure we have all of that set up, having those templates also helps our teams know, even if they're not working only on weatherization, what's going on and what kind of information we are communicating. Yeah, so yes, we have lots of templates. We'll make it easy on ourselves when we know there's 7 projects open and we're running around the state.
Yeah. Yeah. But another quick follow-up for you, EJ. If an agency is just getting started, is there one particular template or area of focus that you think they should kind of work through before launching into it?
I think the timeline is a huge thing that the folks from CETA mentioned, just being aware. And what you can do is there's a multifamily checklist for approval that came out from DOE, I believe in 2022, WPN 2212. And the good thing is that lists absolutely everything you have to have done for a multifamily project. And so if you go through that and kind of order things and who's going to do them and create that task list with your scheduling, I think that would be the first thing to do, in my opinion.
Timeline. Check. This next question I had, I think we've already addressed, so I'm going to skip to the next and direct this back to Megan at CHP. What's your strategy for managing data documentation expectations with crews and contractors?
So not to sound repetitive, but communication, honestly, like making sure everybody's on the same page ahead of time. And also making sure you yourself or you, whoever might be running the project, understand what the requirements are. I don't know about in other states, but in Virginia, we have multiple utility programs and they all want something different. So trying to make sure you're collecting the correct documentation and information is essential. So what EJ kind of said, having checklist, I think is a really good thing. And that's part of what we incorporate when it comes to documentation. You provide checklist not only to our crews, but for instance, if we do have a contractor, HVAC contractor, for example, that's putting in heat pumps for us. And we have to collect the serial number, model number, those type things, like making sure they have a checklist so that they know, okay, I've collected this, this, and this. Oh, and I have to have photos of this, this, and this. So it's not only like checklist documentation, but also what photos do they need to acquire. And that's probably more specifically for utilities. We take, a gazillion pictures for weatherization, but nothing specifically is listed as required. So making sure that you have that checklist documentation. And then as far as paperwork, again, I think it has a lot to do with the beginning part of the communication, making sure that I think Wayne talked a little bit, making sure you have a good point of contact. So if there is a question about documentation, and that really comes into play again when you are finalizing that project. So making sure that you go through, whether it's unit by unit, building by building, that you have collected all the required documentation from whoever it might be, crews, contractors, photos, whatever that looks like. But checklists are huge in making sure that you have everything that you need.
Excellent.
And
Thank you. Oh, yeah,
sorry,
please.
Chase. And I just want to take a second to add a little something to this as well. Just over the past year, the state of Illinois allowed all the agencies to go paperless, which is pretty amazing. So you no longer need paper files. And the key to this is to capture that information while you're doing it, upload that information, and all your checklists will fall right into place. And because it can be difficult to go back and look for things, but so to just make sure you capture that information and you upload it immediately.
Yeah, thank you for that addition, and uh, great note to add. The I think we have time for one more question, which I will direct to Wayne, Tri-County. How do you plan for inventory staging, travel time, and access coordination across large properties?
I think what's worked best for us is we work very closely with the management and maintenance staff. I can't repeat that, enough. Because those folks, of course, know the property, they know the people, they know the clients we're gonna be working with, they know, of course, the layout of the land that they're on and things of that nature. So, what we do is we coordinate with them for the storage of materials and of course, access to the units as well. The clients already know and trust the maintenance and the, management staff, and it's been our experience that especially the maintenance staff, because they have more encounters with maintenance, on a regular basis than they generally do with the management staff. Some of the folks, once they get into the units after the initial run up and things of that nature, they really don't interact with the management folks, but they certainly interact with maintenance on basically a regular basis. So we have them make introductions, with us and to the contractors. And over a period of time, they become familiar with us, and then we become familiar with them. And then, of course, the maintenance staff can also they coordinate um, access to the properties and where they can store materials. Let the folks know that there may be a pod sitting out on this parking lot or that particular spot, and that it's there for a reason. And like I said, we just generally work with the maintenance folks at each unit to do that, and that's going to be your best friend, believe me.
Yeah, I'm seeing some recurring themes here. Communication, trust is now popping up, and I think this is the main way multifamily differs from single family. Those components are still valuable and necessary in single family, but the value and benefit of those relationships, those lines of communication, the trust building that it takes for a larger scale multifamily project, those soft skills are what's really needed in these multifamily projects. I think
Absolutely.
maybe we've got 2 more minutes. I'm going to throw out a question to everybody, whoever wants to jump in uh, for this first learning objective. Have you encountered projects where the sequence had to be changed? How did you adapt, and what did you learn from that experience?
Well,
EJ,
I guess I can start. That is bound to happen from time to time. You can, the best laid plans are never going to follow a script to the T. You don't really expect that to happen. But we've just encountered product delays is one of the biggest things, HVAC products, water heaters, furnaces. We had some delays in getting some of those items. So we just simply had to, have the architectural contractors go in and do all the rest of the work that they could and just simply, like I said, forego the attics is to, not to interrupt the venting and ASHRAE fans and things of that nature from the HVAC contractors. And so just to keep them working, we would just change the schedule and move them, to different buildings to do their thing until such time that the HVAC folks can get back in and get their work done, and then they would follow back up with them. Yes, we heard some grumbling out of it. It can be a pain in the butt when you've got people scheduled to do work and it just don't work out that way. But you simply have got to expect that, and you just got to roll with the punches because it's going to happen, no matter how well planned project you got.
well said. Well said. Um, Okay, I think that's going to do it for this first section. So we just covered the first learning objective, which was, developing a comprehensive project timeline, critical path for multifamily weatherization projects, including order of operations, contractor coordination, and crew planning. We're going to move to our second learning objective, and these questions are intended to get to the core of this learning objective, which is implement effective strategies for resident communication, data collection, and access management to ensure smooth field operations with minimal disruptions. So, first question for this learning objective, I'll direct this to EJ. What's your approach to resident communication before, during, and after a multifamily weatherization project?
Sure, that's a great question. We actually rely on the building management and, like Wayne said, on the facilities folks a great deal because they really do. They know the folks in the building. They already have that trust built with them. You know, if there's just a bunch of folks they don't know, especially if they hear government coming into their homes, they get nervous, and I would too. I get that, and so we have some educational pamphlets that we give out. We have all of our health and safety booklets that has like the Renovate Right in it. We have a lot of radon in Colorado, and so those get handed out at the beginning, and often the property manager or owner will walk around. We actually had one wonderful manager we've been working with right this year, Teresa, and she's fluent in English and Spanish, which is really big in our area. And she read through in Spanish the entire health and safety booklet for a woman who just couldn't read it. And I think just her ability with her eyes, she was an elderly lady. And so we really depend on them. They know the folks, they know who we're going to be able to communicate with. And really listening to them. If they say, don't bother this individual, we will give them information. Listen to them. You know, we rarely have folks that we have trouble communicating with, but I did have a man offer to remove my tattoos with a saw this year. And so you will get lots of interesting people. So trust what the management says. Yeah. So.
Sounds like there's far more to that we just don't have time to get into right now.
Yeah, that's a different day conversation with a beer, I think.
For this next question, I'll direct to Wayne to respond first. What has proven most effective? Property management as the liaison, or direct contact with the residents, or some mix of the two? Nope.
Wayne, I think you're muted.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, though, we use the management and the maintenance staff, of course, as the best liaisons, because generally speaking, as I said before, the maintenance staff has a close relationship with the tenants. They encounter them on a regular basis. They've already have that trust thing built with them. And like I said, as the larger the units, the more presence we'll have there and for a longer period of time. So, you know, after a period of time, the residents will even get to know us, get to know the contractors. You know, they could even, you know, start knowing us on a first name basis, but we generally always start out with the management and the maintenance staff. And again, those maintenance folks, especially if they've been at that property for a long time, they can make this property or this project go much, much smoother for you. Because again, they know so much about the buildings already, and they certainly know the clientele.
Yeah. Again, another theme popping up, the importance of that relationship with maintenance, in particular, and their relationship with the residents. So this next question I'll direct to Megan with CHP. What methods of resident notification have been most successful? Letters, calls, door tags, text messages, anything along those lines?
Yeah. So for us, again, because we use our own folks, we have our own energy auditors and our own crews. We typically do the door hangers, or not door hangers, but posted on people's doors. But that's kind of the our official notice. You know, we take pictures so we know like that the notices have been posted. Most of the times we work with the property management to post those notices. We have developed notices that we'll just send, and it's very to the point, kind of describes. We post notices for our energy audits as well as the work and QCI if needed. But a lot of times that initial those conversations start with the property management or whoever might be on site, ownership, property management. They start communicating that with the residents ahead of time. So it's kind of like just a formality that we do, because you have to, most of these properties, you have to document that you have provided notices to the residents. And so a lot of times, again, it's posting the notice and taking a picture so that we have that documentation. And again, that's more for the energy audit and then the work. But a lot of times during the energy audit, we're having those conversations with the residents to say, this is what we're doing. We're trying to evaluate. We want to be able to come in and do some additional work. These are the type of things we want to try to do. Again, overly communicate as much as possible, so that when we do get that notice posted that we're coming back from work, they are like, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that guy was here with that logo. So typically that's what we've done. And that's worked for us for the multifamilies that we've worked on. But I'm wondering, like, what David, what CETA does, or EJ, what you all do.
So our main communication to the tenants is through property management, because they already have that process in place and established. So, take advantage of that. They send out a notice, and that they already have that established. So, like I say, take advantage of it, and word of mouth between tenants. You have some tenants that are really want to know what's going on. They'll come out, they ask you questions. And then you'll have other tenants that, go to them for that information. So use that in your favor as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you speak with one resident, you're speaking with everyone. EJ, do you have anything to add there?
No, I would say the same thing that David said.
Okay. All right. This next question I'll tee up for either David Ishrock. I think you guys would be great for responding to this. What is your ideal resident notice include to encourage cooperation or confusion? I think you kind of touched on this. Or what strategies other than resident notices are used to encourage cooperation and understanding?
Yeah, I mean, we typically communicate our expectation on how the work gonna go with the building management, as David mentioned, because as everyone said previously too, they are the people who know how to communicate with the tenants. Sometimes tenants speak different languages and need different needs, whether there's ADA units or other tenants with special needs. So we just communicate the expectations, what the contractor need to do, and how to be prepared with during our pre-construction meeting. And after that, the building management print out notices based on our meeting and the details that we went over, and distribute those notices to each unit. They either just stick it to their front door or to the elevator or common area where they have access.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, again, that over communication, multiple channels seems to be continuing to come up. I'll direct this next one to EJ. What's the most common resident-related obstacle that you've faced, whether it's refusal of entry or scheduling conflicts, mistrust, and how do you wind up resolving those?
Sure. It's pretty rare that we run into an issue with someone refusing entry. I think we had one person on each of our buildings this year. And that's going to happen, right? There are people who are private. Most of the challenges we run into is, like David said, they want to ask questions. They want to know what's going on. They're super inquisitive. And, we work a lot with assisted living and senior facilities, and a lot of the folks are lonely and they just want someone to talk to. And so, some of it's just learning how time management for our crews, because the residents, they'll bake them cookies. They're usually very, very wonderful. It's very rare that we get the folks that we really don't want to go and visit them. And I think before we do that, what helps is during our bid walk, when the contractors are there, during the audit, and then when the first crew comes into each of the units in the building, we ask that the facilities person or management walks around and introduces them so that they have an idea. They got the notices either on their door, in their mailbox, however that building does it. But then someone walks around and says, "Hey, this is EJ. She's here. She's going to look at your bath fan. She's got some equipment. It'll only take this much time. This is our hope." So yeah, over communication as always. Having that warm handoff from somebody that they already know and trust. Yeah, and you roll with the punches. If somebody wants to talk and for a little while, you try and balance it out with the folks that don't want you in there. And we get lots of folks who are like, "You look like my granddaughter," and it's really sweet because my grandparents aren't around anymore. So I like talking to them too. And we've got good contractors who are very, very similar. They love it.
And
Yeah.
another positive thing, a lot of times when we go to these buildings or these properties and we meet the tenants, they've been asking for services or things to be done for years, and nothing has ever been done. So when you arrive and you say, "Hey, I have a new refrigerator for you. Upgrading your lighting," they're enthusiastic. They're so happy, that somebody is finally there and they're getting some services that they've requested for years. So it's a lot of positivity involved when you encounter the clients.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that might be something to incorporate into those initial pitches with when meeting with property owners or property managers. Like, here's a new way to engage with your residents, not just, collecting rent and reminders. Um, for this next question, I'll direct this to Wayne. Do you take any special steps when working with vulnerable populations or non-English speaking residents? I mean, we kind of touched on this a bit.
We did, yeah, as EJ and Dave sort of alluded to. Each situation, of course, is going to be different, but generally we'll know which units are occupied by disabled persons or non-English speaking persons by the application process, and then of course the initial walkthrough and working with the management and maintenance staff. So depending on to what degree that is, again, we'll follow up with management and see how they handle the tenants, if you will, in these types of situations, and how do they communicate. For instance, if they have a certain interpreter that's familiar with certain tenants' language, we're not going to want to, step on that relationship. Of course, we'll see if they can call that interpreter in. If not, we have a lot of Spanish speaking folks in our area, and we do have access to those interpreters and things of that nature if we need them. But the first thing we're going to do is inquire as to how do the folks that are already on site, deal with these types of situations. And we'll try to use that and mimic that as well, to the best of our ability.
And we all have a smartphone. Get familiar
Absolutely.
with it. Google Translate could
Right,
be
right.
a lifesaver for you.
It can, but in a lot of cases, they'll have, you know, Mrs. Smith over, two doors down generally, does our interpretations for this folks. And if that's what they've got going on, of course, we'll try to leave that in place for them.
Yeah, quick side note, just from our own experience, granted, this is a manufactured home park that we're working on uh, for another client, but we developed this community advocate model where in this case, we're working with a grant And we have the ability to compensate them for their time to help us translate with predominantly Spanish-speaking residents when we don't have them on staff, and that's worked pretty well. I'm hoping to report on that soon. Next
Chase,
up,
actually, could I jump in real quick? Because it kind of builds on, there's a question in the chat that kind of builds on what you just said. Linda Timbers asked, does anyone do tenant meetings to be able to explain the process to larger groups, maybe a pizza party, and get people on board?
yeah, Sita, I think I recall you mentioning something along those lines.
Yes, we do. We call them kickoff meetings. So typically, the building already have a meeting set up to address other issues. So when we get ready to start a project, we'll come in at the beginning of that meeting, give them a little background about our organization, what we do, and how we serve the community. Um, we explain to them directly how what we do is going to impact them. And then we have a Q&A session so they get to and we answer all the questions that they have. And it typically take about 15 to 20 minutes and it works wonderful. Yeah, so that's definitely a tool. If you can take advantage of, definitely take advantage of it.
I think that's a great concept. Any other suggestions?
So interestingly enough, we did something, it was after the project though. So we had installed heat pumps and we realized that they had like not complicated, but the thermostats were very different than what had previously been there. And so after there were a lot of questions, we had the representative from it was train equipment come out and they did an ice cream social. But it was after the fact, but they had brought a little freezer with a bunch of ice cream and just told the residents about it so anybody could come. And they had actually made up a 1 page, just like laminated card that very briefly explained the thermostat, and so people could better understand it and use it more efficiently. So it was kind of after the fact, but it did work and lots of people came out.
That's a great idea. Use those vendor relationships. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna we've got time for maybe one more question. Looking at there's kind of an open discussion here. I won't direct this to anybody, but if anybody feels compelled to chime in first, I'd welcome you to it. How do you sequence work to minimize the number of times crews or contractors need to re-enter units?
I can speak to this a little bit. Our project manager, Julie, who I mentioned before, does a pre-construction meeting with all of the contractors that are on the project, with property management, with our team, and then with anybody else who's involved, right? If they can get the maintenance folks in there, if they have scheduling people at their office for some of the contractors. And she goes through everything. There is a calendar of when people anticipate being in there, how often. We talked to the property managers about what their preference is. Would they rather have folks in there all around the same time, or would they rather spread them out? And that just depends on each of the buildings. Sometimes it depends on the residents. And so often we just go with what they ask for and we do things in stages, right? We're not going to do air sealing before we do attic insulation, and we're not going to do either of those before we do bath fans. And so we try and line it up so that it works with everybody's schedule and talk through that. And so then everybody has an expectation of who's there and when. And like I said, we have the management introduce folks the first time they're in the unit and kind of talk through how much time it's going to take. And usually people are just really, really grateful. There's a couple that get frustrated that you're in and out, but I mean, we have a lot of them that say, I left the door unlocked, just lock it when you go. They're like David said, they've been asking for these and they are really excited for the things that are happening the majority of the time.
Yeah, that's great. Any other comments from the panel? And
I was gonna say, I would just agree with AJ. I think most of the time, we do try to, again, kind of stage it in a way, again, that makes the most sense. But, or I should say, and again, the residents are typically good with, they're getting improvements. They're happy to have us. But we definitely, sometimes we'll have like, for example, um, base load crew, for lack of a better way of saying it, and they'll go in and they'll do the quick things. And then another crew will come around behind them and do, say, the ashtray fan, for example. But we do try to minimize the number of door knocks as possible. And the residents, again, they're pretty good with just, again, like I said, I left it unlocked. Go ahead and do what you need to do. Most of them are pretty good but working with.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Megan. And I think we can squeeze one more question in with our time available for this section. And again, I'll kind of open this up to anybody to respond to this go around. Can anyone share a successful strategy or creative workaround that helped avoid delays due to access or resident coordination issues?
I'd like to share one strategy that actually helped us to minimize re-entry to the units is we invite the contractor to walk through some of the units, typically vacant units, to just take a look at the units, how they do look like measure the opening of the fridge, for example. Make a sense of how the AC is going to be installed, the opening of the AC is and we also provide them with estimated quantities of each measure that need to be ordered and installed in units. So once they start commission, they have the proper quantities and measures that need to be installed, and they won't be surprised that the opening of the fridge is not good enough to install this fridge or any other issues. That also minimize the number of re-entry to the units. Because say, for example, like they did not order proper amount of fridges and they need to wait until they get the other shipment of the fridges, then they will need to get back to this unit to install the fridge. So being prepared with a good estimate of fridges quantities that need to be installed, having those quantities prior to the work commission, help them get all the work done within the same day.
Yeah, so in addition to a pre-construction meeting, having some sort of preliminary inspection of the units, extrapolating from that preliminary assessment to identify quantities and so on. Yeah,
Yeah.
any other additions?
Yeah, the key is to try to complete as many tasks as you can in one day. If you're coming back and forth in the same day, um, tenants don't seem to mind. But if you do something on Tuesday, then you got to come back on Wednesday, then you got to come back on Thursday, then that's when it becomes an issue. So try to plan accordingly to get as much as you can get done in one day.
Yeah, so a lot more intentional planning than maybe a single family job may take. I think that will close it up for our second learning objective. We're going to move on to the third discussion, meeting our third learning objective. Third learning objective is apply project and contractor management practices, including handling change orders, invoices, permitting, and performance standards throughout the project execution. And I'll direct this first question to CHP or Megan. How do you set expectations with contractors and property staff before the project begins? I think we've kind of touched on the pre-construction, but uh, curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. So it is a little different for us, again, because we're mainly using crews. So we don't have a pre-construction meeting. What we do is we have a pre-walk of the property meeting. So we'll bring, because a lot of times the crews that we're using have never been to this project. And so we will have everybody on site. We'll walk the property. You know, everybody will kind of review the work scope, like this is what we're going to be doing in each unit, get the layout, get the feel, and hopefully if like the maintenance is there or the property manager's there, we can introduce like who's going to be our point of contact with the crews that are on site to the property manager and maintenance. Again, sometimes they're not on site, and that's okay. But typically, yeah, we do that pre-walkthrough with the crews again, so they can become familiar. As far as like setting expectations, again, I think those expectations are set through the process and making sure before the work starts, having that conversation, whether it be a formal pre-construction meeting with everybody in attendance, or having that conversation with the property manager, owner, the stakeholders of, okay, we're planning on starting on this date. We're going to start in this building, or we're going to start in these two buildings, giving them a timeline. Okay, it's going to take probably, you know, whatever, you know, 2 weeks per building. Again, giving them as much information as possible to begin with. Again, for us, it's not as formal because we aren't using contractors. So it probably, ours looks a little bit different than probably the rest of the folks that are using contractors. My guess is there would be way more formality with that.
Yeah, quick follow-up. When establishing those expectations on, let's just focus on the timeline situation. I assume you would want to kind of, what's the phrase? You want to under promise, over deliver, as opposed
Oh
to.
yeah. Oh, most definitely. And again, I think we've done this for a long time, so we do kind of have a rough idea of, okay, this is about how long it's going to take us in each unit, depending on, you know, what the work scope is, and this is about how long it'll take us per building. So we add on, you know, either it's hours or days to that, and that's what we're communicating with the property so that we can over deliver and meet those expectations, because inevitably one of those units or one of those buildings is going to take longer. So making sure you have those contingency plans in place and timelines in place, I think is really important. And again, making sure you're communicating that. I think the other piece of that is if there is an issue where it is taking longer, or you do run into a problem, making sure you're communicating that immediately with the property manager or maintenance, you know, stakeholders in general, that there was an issue, you did run into something, whether it's the fault of the folks doing the work or something came up with the resident. Again, making sure that's communicated so that once you're done with the project and you're getting ready to do that closeout and walk off the property, they're not going, well, there was an issue with this one unit. You've brought it to their attention ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And related to our next question, which I will direct to Wayne initially, and what documents, tools, or tactics have been most useful in preventing miscommunication? Let's see.
Yes, and to not to sound like a broken record, because we've been there's a theme going on here, I'm sure that they've been picking up on. And again, it's communication with everybody. So we sure that the contractor, you know, have met each other multiple times. And if they're not already familiar with each other, to discuss the project and, you know, exchange contact information and things like that from each other, and as well as all the parties involved. So they've got to communicate with each other. And then, of course, we got to make sure that we open have open lines of communications with the tenants and management staff and things of that nature. But a lot of things that we've done, and I believe it was EJ or somebody mentioned earlier, by using Excel spreadsheets, as far as the documents are concerned, or tools, if you will. I've had my assistants made our own input documents, if you will, that cover different areas of the house, the HVAC, attic, walls, lighting, water heating, things of that nature. And we'll have a separate document for each typical, section of the weatherization, and we'll coordinate with management and maintenance to assure that those are accurate, and we provide those documents as a follow-up along with the scope of work and the work orders with the contractors. So it's just a second document that they can refer to make sure that they're on the right page and they're following the work order directly, and there's no miscommunication between what we're asking for on the work orders, if you will, and what's actually being presented and going to be installed in the homes. So it's a lot easier to look at a lighting schedule than it is to flip through several pages of a work order and try to keep up with those types of things. So again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but communication is the key to prevent miscommunication, is to have that communication up front. Don't assume that everyone else knows what's going on, or that, the HVAC guys know what the architectural guys are doing, and or maintenance knows that you're going to be in certain units at certain times and things of that nature. So you just got to, again, it may sound like a broken record even to the folks at the property, but that's what you got to do. You just got to make sure everyone stays on the same page. And just because they're on the same page the first 2 or 3 days or a week or so does not mean it's going to stay that way as well. So as property project manager, you've got to stay on it, and you've got to be doing these in progress inspections. You got to stay in communication with these folks, at every level.
Yeah, a quick follow-up, Wayne, on that. I think you referred to them as the input documents. So you would have like an input document for just the HVAC work and a separate one for water heater. And are you maintaining or updating those input documents on a daily, weekly basis? And are you sharing them with the property on a daily, weekly basis?
As Dave alluded to earlier, Illinois has gone to a paperless system. It's not quite paperless, but what we do now is we have a new system to where when we're at the properties, we just input all the information into the computerized system, and it picks up on that information. And when we get back to the office, it uploads, and then that's what we use as the basis for creating the work order, if you will, the overall scope of work and work orders. Well, whenever we do the big projects, with or without the old input documents, was just simply a document that went through each section of the home that you'd fill out by paper, and then we would input that into our, what Illinois called the WeatherWorks system. I know obviously other states have all different kinds of other systems they input their information into. But at the end of the day, we supplement that with our own documents. So what we do is we have a list of all the HVAC equipment that happens to be in this building, the model numbers, serial numbers, and the whole 9 yards, and what's currently there. And then, of course, we know we're going to call for to have that those units changed out. So, having those separate set of eyes, if you will, and separate set of documents, and not just relying on what may be in the weatherization system, is, became a good tool and a big help for us.
Excellent. Okay. Duly noted. Next question, I'll direct to EJ first. How do you communicate performance standards, both technical and administrative, to contractors or crews? I guess you have contractor-based approach.
Right. We do have the contractor-based approach. We also do have staff. Like I said, we have a couple of us who are full-time, but then we do have a lot of teammates that help, like 1 day a week, depending on how much they're allocated to the grant. So at the beginning of each year, I would say that there's multiple strategies that we take. At the beginning of each program year, I review the policy changes from the state, and let the rest of the team know what those are. anytime a new memo or WPN comes out, weatherization program notice for those of you who aren't familiar with WPNs, those come out from the Department of Energy. I'll review that, and sometimes they don't have anything to do with multifamily. Sometimes they're just single family. So I'll send out an email. You don't need to really worry about this, just mentioning that it happened, or these are the 5 things y'all should really know about this. I think with that, having regular meetings with folks, I meet with our finance folks probably once a month to talk through, different things that we're invoicing, different I should say projects that are going on. So they're aware of when invoices are going to come from which contractors, so they're paying attention when a $350,000 invoice is coming in. It doesn't blindside them, because we learned the hard way, they don't like that. So right, over communication. All of our paperwork has policies and expectations in it. So all the contractors have to fill out a request for proposal from us. And we request that they read that. They all sign a contract of what the expectations are. It's very infrequent that we've had to review that with a contractor. If there are changes in rules that impact the contractors, usually I'll communicate that either through email or at the bid walks we have. So all contractors are required to attend bid walks before they're allowed to write a proposal for each of the properties. And so we usually have like a little chat ahead of time while we wait for everybody to get there, and I'll just mention the things that have changed since the last time. A lot of our contractors in different pockets of the state, since we cover all of Colorado, they know each other, they know the program. We get a lot of the same folks bidding over and over. If we're in Denver, I know the 3 HVAC contractors that are going to show up every time. Because it's just, there's people who really want to work with the program, that care about what they're doing. And so they know a lot of the roles already, or they catch on quick, or they talk to each other. We have 2 HVAC contractors, different companies, they'll drive together to bid walks and they'll talk through what's expected. And then I have just made a lot of instruction templates. I have we created a funding matrix while I was at the state of how you can braid funds. But once I got to EOC, I also made the what you're allowed to do matrix. And so it basically says, this person can use these funds. Anybody can use TNTA funds if they're in this category. And there's like squares where it's like, you can pay for food with this. And under DOE, it says absolutely not. And so that way it's set up so if they can't get a hold of myself or Julie and don't know what the rules are, they can refer to one of the 10 Google Docs I've created and see that there's instructions there. So lots of over communication in all ways, I think, is the theme today.
That sounds really useful. Really useful. Sita, I have a similar kind of related question that I'll direct to you all first. What's your process for making sure all contractor work aligns with things like program standards, your state and local codes, and WAP policy requirements?
So one of the things I do is I try to be hands-on. When you're starting a project, you always want to be out there on the first day. That's a must. And then if you have any milestones, make sure that you're there for those milestones. And when you're in the field, pick up a tube of caulk, look at the materials that they're using, pick up a box, read what the box says. I had a contractor, they were installing aerators. I pick up an aerator and it's very tiny, but read how many GPM, gallons per minute, that's on that aerator. I had a contractor, he had a box, they looked identical. Some said 1.5 GPM, some say 2.5 GPM. They didn't know, they looked the same. They thought they were installing the right equipment. So go out there, be hands-on, pay attention, pick up the materials, examine the materials. Their intention is to do a good job, and they're not out there to try to deceive you or do anything, wrong. But sometimes they just don't know, and it's your your job to go out there to assist them and make sure that they're doing it right.
I appreciate the way you framed that with you being ultimately accountable, to convey that message and keep everybody on track. Anything else to add from any other folks on keeping contractors aligned with uh, codes and policies?
I'll build off what David said just on the aerators. Bring a magnifying glass or someone under the age of 40 who can read that, because that writing is small, and I don't know about anybody else, but I struggle every time. So just make sure you have a tool, maybe a camera that focuses really well so you can do that. We've had to stick, cameras behind things before to see different tags, or, what flow rates are, what MMBTUs are. And so make sure you've got a way to kind of see all parts of the project so that you know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great point. Megan, I'll ask you this next question. How or have you implemented corrective action protocols? And if so, what has worked in addressing underperformance?
Threats. Just kidding. That's a joke. Just kidding. Just kidding. Sorry, I have to lighten the mood sometimes. Um, yeah. So honestly, I don't think we've ever necessarily implemented corrective action protocols. We have run into issues, and typically, I will add on that, if we are using a contractor, like, again, making sure that your contracts have language in there that they do need to meet SWS standards, and, referencing WPNs if needed. Again, that should, pretty standard. But if somebody's new, developing policies for multifamily, make sure that your contracts with your contractors includes that language. So again, it also should address if there are corrective actions needed, and responsibility. Typically, those are handled on a case-by-case basis for us. I mean, there was a issue at one of our projects recently, and the property management was not pleased with the HVAC subcontractor. And it was just the HVAC subcontractor thought they could get more done than what they could, and so they tore out HVAC systems and didn't get new ones put in there before the end of the day. And it's like, oh no, you cannot do that. So having those conversations ahead of time, and again, a lot of times it's just that relationship you have with the property management and with the contractor. But again, making sure that, your documentation when it comes to contracts addresses and just has some standard language. And I do want to say real quick, I think Linda asked if presenters would be willing to share some of their templates. And I would say absolutely yes. I don't think we're happy to share, and we are, I see AJ, you nodding your head, happy to share whatever templates that we have with anyone. But again, so I think that would be, again, making sure it's in your documentation, and then addressing it immediately. And hopefully it's not often that you have to worry about it. Yeah, like I said, we don't have a formal process. It's more of, there's a problem. Okay, let's get it taken care of.
Yeah, yeah. And we will be providing everyone's contact information at the end of this presentation. It'll be on the slide deck as well.
Could I throw something in, Chase? Would that be
please.
okay?
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, we had our first instance where we had to fire a contractor this year, and it was very challenging. And so my advice would be, when you first start setting out, making the contract, if you're working with contractors, make sure you know what the contract says, and make sure it has some kind of repercussions in there. Because we got to the point where we were reactive and we didn't have, we were like, here's the things you have to do, but we didn't have a what happens if you don't. And so then we actually had to talk to our lawyers about what was the way to break this contract. And so I would say be as proactive as you can, and just outline it, check with whomever you need to at your organization, to make a plan so that you're not feeling lost when you have to do that and then don't have a way to communicate or don't know how to communicate it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if we have time later on, maybe we can come back to offboarding contractors that are underperforming. We've had some experience in my day with that. Uh, for the current learning objective, though, I'll move on to the next question for Wayne. What strategies have helped you avoid the scope of work from a project from escalating or unauthorized changes that can derail budgets and timelines? You know, you have those onion projects that just reveal more and more layers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we found again the best strategy to avoid cost of delays and change orders or changes to the scope of work is to make sure that all parties are present. You know, we have them there during the assessment phase and certainly through the final walkthrough before construction. And we make sure that we go through a complete review of all the work orders for all the contractors that are there all together, so everyone's on the same page. So, I mean, we'll look through the attics, crawl spaces, you know, the whole 9 yards with the HVAC side, architectural side, the maintenance staff, and all parties that are involved. And, you know, if they're cookie cutter units, we'll make sure that we hit a good share of those, at least 2/3 of them, so we know, you know, that again, everybody's on the same page. In progress inspections, as Dave alluded to, you got to be out there when this project is going on. You can't just, you know, be like Ron Popeil and set it and forget it. You have got to get out there and you've got to be, you know, an integral part of what's going on a daily basis. And not to mention, you know, you got to make sure that it's clear that only change orders approved in advance, you know, by the program director or somebody that you're putting in that position can approve those change orders. Again, you know, our system in Illinois now has gone pretty much computerized, if you will, to an online platform, and the contractors can just, you know, ask for a change order just simply over that platform, over that electronic platform. And then, you know, we can react and approve that. But when it comes to multis, you know, I want to know exactly what that change order is, what the reason for it is, because let's face it, if it's a single family home, that's one thing. If they call for a change order, you know, it could be, you know, no big deal. I need to fix this window or, you know, put some weather strip on this door or whatever it happens to be. If you got a change order in a 100 unit multi, whatever it is that they're trying to change, that may go across, you know, that you may need to do that 100 times. So, you know, it's something that we want to be aware of right up front. And again, it's something that we make sure that, you know, myself or my assistant approves that and we know exactly what it is. And everyone knows, you know, what page we're on before we do that. So, and again, we won't authorize any change orders without it being directed to us personally and not just through our digital platform.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Wayne. I do want to get to one more question for this learning objective, which might put us a little over schedule, but I think it's going to be worthwhile. EJ, I'll direct this one to you. And it's how do you structure your invoicing process with contractors? Is it unit by unit, by building, or the whole project, and carry those costs until project closeout? Do you practices or tools that you've used to develop and help you keep track of those leveraged funding sources?
Sure. I have a very specific format for invoices and costs that I use to keep track of where you know, I put the rules in Excel of what's even allowed to go in the different cells. You have to pick from a list so that everything's uniform. I'd be happy to share that as well. I had a thought that just escaped me. That's great. What we did at the beginning of last year is we were allowed to start braiding funds for the first time. And so when we communicated to the contractors, we told them what we needed invoices to look like, that they needed to be broken down by building. They didn't have to be broken down by unit, depending, you know, we do a lot of centrally heated multifamily And some of them are really big and some are smaller. We'll have 8 to 100 units. And so we don't necessarily want that, but if we can have everything broken down by building, since if you don't know, all buildings have to be approved separately. At least they do in Colorado. I believe they have to all over, not just by the property, but each building, and it has its own savings to investment ratio, for that building. And so, we ask for it like that. We ask labor and materials. We ask specifically what the items are. It's not just external lighting. It's, these sconces on, on the west side of the building, so that we have everything written out. It did take some time for our contractors to agree to do that. And I wouldn't say boundary setting, but there's a lot of you have to over communicate that, because a lot of the folks are not used to that. They're like, here's an in progress charge for 50%, and I'm like, guys, that's not going to cut it anymore. Like maybe 10 years ago, but now we really have to have all of these things, especially with all of the regulations getting tightened up. And so I think, again, over communicating. I did make an invoice template for them to use. Nobody's used it, but they use it to look at and what's required on it. And so I think that's helped us a great deal, and then just sticking with it. And I've talked to a lot of finance folks at the contractors, so not the actual folks in the field, but Linda, who works in finance at one of our HVACs, she totally gets it that she needs to have everything labeled out. And so she'll even send it back to them and say, no, make sure this has more detail on it.
That's a really interesting technique. Yeah, I like that. I think we're going to have to close it up now for Learning Objective 3's discussion and move on to Learning Objective 4. So for this section, the objective is to plan and execute efficient project closeout procedures, including QCI protocols, client education, warranty transfers, and coordination with grantee and funding timelines. So I'm setting the timer again, and I'll direct this first question to Wayne. How early in the project do you begin planning for closeout? Are there any specific milestones that you set along the way?
Well, honestly, we plan the closeout of the project basically as soon as it starts. Again, I mentioned my assistant earlier making the spreadsheets that are sort of a secondary check and balance for the work order. Well, she also does the same thing when it comes to the financing of the project. We list out all the funding sources, all the categories, health and safety versus HVAC. And because in Illinois, we allow for partial draws on large projects. Because, most contractors in our area certainly can't afford to float, $1 million plus on a project before they receive any pay. So we are along the way, setting timelines to get X amount of projects completed before they can send in an invoice, if you will. So, if we got a 100-unit project, we're not going to let them invoice for every little single furnace. As EJ alluded to, maybe we'll have them do one building, which may contain 10 units. And once they finish that, then we can let them invoice. Of course, we'll send QCI inspectors out, make sure everything passes muster. And then we'll come back and process the bills with our finance department. And then with the finance department, we will then submit that into our state fiscal officers, and they'll approve that payment and send that back. Of course, then we'll get the contractors paid. But at the same time, we're keeping track of all of this, not only on just our systems, whatever system you may have. It is crucial that you have your own system for tracking as well. So again, she'll set up certain spreadsheets just for each project, a large project like this, and track those costs to the T. So I'm constantly, bugging her with how are we looking on the cost compared to the system, and then going over to the finance department and having them check their cost as well that they're putting out, that's going out of the GRS systems and things of that nature. So I'm just constantly, tracking those costs all along the way. That way, when it does come to the closeout, there's not, well, wait, there's $50,000 here that I can't account for one way or the other. So you got to get on it early, and you got to stay on it. It's back to, you got to be totally involved and committed into this project, not scare anybody off, but you've got to watch it. Just make sure, like you would any single family house, you treat this no differently. It's just on a larger scale. You got to watch where the money's going and make sure that it's being, applied appropriately, and you're tracking it in the right categories. Because you could get down to the end of the year or the end of the project, and you've got an over expenditure in the health and safety category versus the material and labor category, and that may require some adjustments. But even along the way, you may need adjustments. There's been more than one time that I've had to contact the state and have monies moved around, modifications and things of that nature, to make sure that it stays on track. But do that early and often, and you'll be in good shape.
Excellent. Yeah, here again, Excel sheets, and it's a powerful tool. And as Megan and I, we had a retired boss, Bill Beachy. He had a spreadsheet to track his spreadsheets, is what he would say. EJ, it's kind of similar question along the same lines. Have you found it more efficient to close out by unit, by building, the full project all at once? How do things work in Colorado?
Sure. We don't necessarily close out unit by unit, since we are centrally heated most of the time. It just doesn't make sense. That only really will happen if we have instances where something happened in one unit. We weren't able to install a bath fan. We had one that came in broken last year, and so there was a unit that couldn't get closed. So we usually close building by building. We had a project where we had two of the buildings this year closed 3 months before the other, because we had to use readiness dollars when we found a rat infestation. Yep. And so, there's funny things like that. But we have been able to close some projects altogether. So it depends on where it's at for us, like how often we can get there to do in-progress inspections, or if we have to send somebody else from the team who's closer, since we service all of Colorado. But I would say building by building works the best financially for us, since the costs all go together and have to feed into the same savings to investment ratio. I had another point, but it's fallen out of my head. I've been doing too many boiler trainings this week, and now I don't know what's going on. So I apologize for that.
Oh, no worries. It's been a long 90 minutes for you guys. I've been grilling you here. Sita, next question for you. How do you manage closeout timing when a project spans multiple buildings or funding program years? Sure, whether.
Yeah. So for example, if the project, first of all, I would like to confirm if you guys can hear me. My voice is muffled.
Oh, it's a little bit muffled, but
How about now?
that's better.
Okay. Yeah, so when there's multiple buildings, but it's the same job, we manage to close at the same time, like by job number, not by building. So say, for example, we have job with multiple buildings, we inquire final counts from the contractor. Once we do the QCI, we confirm the counts that were correct, then we do the invoices by packages. So say, for example, they did a bunch of apartment lighting changes and fixtures. So we invoice this as one measure with total cost and total quantity. So once we receive the invoice, it's going to be one invoice with list of measures that were completed, and one final total cost for that project. We came across one job where we had to phase it out because of sometimes limited funding or financial year. So the project was bigger than what was available at that time. So we had to phase it out between 2 financial years. In that case, we dealt with that job as 2 separate jobs with 2 separate invoices as to account the cost to the 2 different financial years. And David, if you want to add on this.
Yeah, I'll add on as well. So another instance, we had a project where we had a total of 8 buildings. Um, in our IWAP funds, that's our Illinois Home Weatherization Assistance Program, our funds couldn't cover the entire 8 buildings. And in Illinois, we don't have to do each building individually. We can group the buildings together. So what we did was we separated 2 of the buildings. We did those 2 buildings with IWAP funds and utility funds, and then we did the remaining 6 buildings with IWAP funds only. So that was a creative way of us being able to capitalize on different funding sources and meet all the needs of the property that were required.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through that example. Megan, I'll direct this next question to you. That's when and how do you schedule your in-process and final quality control inspections?
Again, so for us, it is a little bit different because of crew-based, and we have our QCIs on site at the time while the work is going on, and to do the QCIs as the work is being completed. We track things by unit because we typically don't do central systems. Not typically, we don't do buildings with central systems and things like that. So all of our units are individually heated and cooled, and we have to submit to the state unit by unit. We cannot submit building by building. So we track everything per unit. And that's how we do our QCIs is per unit. And again, it helps our QCIs are on site while the work is happening. So they're addressing anything in process right then and there, as well as once the work is completed, they are completing the QCI paperwork that is required per unit to be submitted to the state.
Yeah, that's another great callback to understanding the rules specific to your state. Wayne, I'll direct this next question to you. What's involved in your coordination with the grantee or state office during closeout? Are there documents or reviews that you prepare for in advance?
Yeah, in the state of Illinois, we're lucky that the state stays very involved throughout the entire process, especially for those that, of us that are not necessarily new to the weatherization, but new to doing multi and the low-rise multi rules and things of that nature. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the folks at CETA have been a big help with getting us up and running as well, along the way. So they've, kudos to them as well. But as far as the state, they've been very good with staying involved with the process. In fact, our first couple of projects, we've even had the state techs and the state program manager actually come out and visit the site that we were working on. And the last project that we just finished, in fact, we even had folks from DOE visiting. But as far as a closeout is concerned, like I say, they're involved throughout the entire process as well as the closeout process. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been doing partial draws, so they would have a good idea. Obviously, they would have we have to submit a budget for our entire projects up front. So they're watching that all along the way. And then as we're putting in draws, we keep those on spreadsheets that are provided by our state program managers. And so they're watching and tracking these costs all along the way. And again, here's that communication thing. I stay in constant communication with our state program managers. let them know where we're at along the way and things of that nature. And I also mentioned that I had to modify some of the budgets to move money around. So that takes the state finance officer as well as the state program manager. So, we keep them involved at basically every step of the process along the way. And so our closeouts have actually gone pretty smoothly. Just to back up a little bit, as Dave mentioned, we had a project as well that we basically didn't have enough money to do the entire project in 1 year. So we just put some of the buildings in 1 year and closed those out. And then we finished out the rest of the project and closed out those buildings with the next grant series or cycles. So, luckily enough in Illinois, like I say, they're very hands-on when it comes to this. They'll, they don't, try to micromanage, but by any means, but they're there and they'll help you walk through the process. So, and I'm sure the rest of the states, folks would do the same thing. So, don't let that scare you off.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. EJ, I'll direct this next one to you. What's your approach to client education for multifamily properties? What kinds of materials or formats seem to work the best, whether printed, walkthroughs, videos, other?
We have kind of a combination of them. The folks that do kind of oh, Megan, what did you call it? The like real quick installs.
I call it base load installs.
Yeah, so stuff like that, if we're putting in just like light bulbs, the aerators, new shower heads, we have a group that does that is called our Mile High Youth Corps. And so they actually get paid to provide education about all of those things to the residents when they're installing them. We worked that out with the folks that ran their program, and they just charge us an extra fee per hour per unit. And we worked it out that way. So that's nice. They go through and explain exactly what's happening. It helps because there's a lot of folks who, they put the aerator on the kitchen sink that you can control the flow on, and they don't realize you can control the flow. So they see it as just the slow trickle, but that they don't know that they can change it. So that helps. And then you have less people who are unscrewing things and just throwing them places. Or things like, the carbon monoxide detectors, like we're going to plug this in, please leave it plugged in. This is why. So we do that. Like I said earlier, we have the health and safety pamphlets that we send with the property management or the facilities folks, so they can go through and explain all of it. And then, we do a lot of answering questions. At least one of us, Julie or myself, is in every single unit before it gets closed. And so if folks still have questions and they're still confused, we're happy to talk to them. We're happy to provide information. One thing that we do at the end of a project is also an information sheet packet, I should say, that has all the contractors that did the work, what warranties there are, what was installed, there's spec sheets of everything that went in, and the front page of it is how often to change the furnace filter, and when do you need maintenance, and when should you call the contractor, when you should call us. Something I'm excited with is that the state just made a new magnet. So our WAP folks at the state made a new magnet that just goes on the fridge that says turn your lights off when you leave. Just some of that really basic stuff. Like, did you know, it's better to keep your thermostat at a like solid instead of like sending it up and down all the time, and messing with it. It shows them how to program the thermostat. So, not that one, sorry, that tells them that their thermostat might be programmed, but I think just giving them information in as many ways as possible, providing it both online, in paper, the magnets, just over communicating as much as possible, and then really being open to taking the call a year down the road when somebody calls from, one of our senior centers and they really are confused or they don't understand, or they're just upset with it and they need somebody to listen.
Yeah, it absolutely happens. And that tees up our next question really well, actually. Sita, I'll address this one to you guys. How do you handle the transfer of warranties and operations and maintenance documentation? Is this something that you bundle with client education, or do you treat it like a separate task?
In multifamily, we treat it as a separate task. So at the end of every project, we create what we call a closeout package. So that closeout package, it contains all of the information that transpired throughout the whole process from intake to closeout. So we provide them a packet with all the initial intake documents, any reports that are created, any emails that transpired, all the correspondence that goes on with that project. So everything from the beginning to end is encompassed into a packet, and that includes cut sheets and warranties from the manufacturer. Our program, we provide a 1 year warranty for materials and labor, so that's included as well. So we have one package that we provide at the end of the project.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you kind of walk it through like that. That's a follow-up question on that. The correspondence, how is that included or incorporated as part of that packet? Is it like actually printing out email correspondence, or is there
So
something?
it's a digital. We send it to them digitally.
Okay, that's it. That's really interesting. Let me get back up to my questions here. Uh, I'll address this one to Megan next. How do you manage the final packaging of project documentation? What does your checklist look like, and who ultimately signs off on the project?
Thanks, Shakes. Yeah. So, most of the time, uh, again, for us and the types of projects that we typically work on, we have individual files, electronic, most of the times electronic client files, where we upload all the documentation per unit. Excuse me, uh, we use Hancock for our reporting system in Virginia. And so Hancock, there's a checklist of documentation that we have to upload. So it kind of provides a checklist for us. Ultimately, that project is looked at either as a whole or unit by no less than 4 people. It goes from our field superintendents, who are gathering the final materials list, the QCI documentation, making sure the pictures are uploaded, from being on site up to the electronic file. Then it's reviewed by one of our senior production managers. Then that goes to we call them project coordinators. Our project coordinators are the ones that we have to go into each individual job or unit in Hancock and true up all of the information. So materials, labor, update any measures if needed. So the project coordinators are reviewing that. And then at the end, the final piece of it is our energy efficiency program specialist. Stephanie, she's on the call. She takes that information, she reviews it, and she's the one that assigns and signs off on the final financial allocations. So whether what we're billing to IJA, what we're billing to LIHEAP, what we're billing to DOE, and everything that's included with that. So she's not only looks at it on that end, but our monthly invoicing to the state is incorporated with that. So all of that financial piece of it. So as far as, again, multifamily, it's all individually packaged per unit. Again, we don't necessarily have a checklist for it, because it's so similar to single family, how we have to do it. We just do our single family checklist as you could call it.
Excellent. Thank you. We're coming right up on time, but there is one more question I'd like to ask. If Wayne, I'll address it to you, but if we have 2 minutes to spend on this, I would welcome other folks' input. Can you share a lesson learned or a best practice that made your closeout process faster, smoother, or more compliant in any way?
Yeah, sure. For the sake of time, I'll try to be as brief as possible. And I've mentioned it several times before, but the best advice I can provide is to create your own tracking spreadsheets and to make sure you're checking your funding categories and invoices very often, at least once a week, if not even more. Check the numbers against your system, your fiscal operations officer systems, and your own spreadsheets in the trial balance sheets. If all the costs are in agreement, you're probably in pretty good shape, but catching any errors early, that's the key, you know. By the project's end, if everything balances all across those areas, you're probably in pretty good shape. So, best practice is just have multiple tracking sources and make sure you're checking them often and make sure they're in alignment with each other. And again, if they are, the closeout ought to go very smooth.
Excellent. That's well stated. Any final thoughts before we start to close up shop? Maybe take a question or two from the audience. Okay. Well, in that case, I haven't been keeping track of the chat. Are there any questions from the audience that we should address or try to, even if there are addressed, should we try to include it on the recording?
There was one question, Megan responded to it, but I think the rest of the panel may have some other thoughts. So it's from Linda Timbers. She said, how much leveraging / braiding of multiple funds is typical for a project? If you're using LIHEAP for your braiding with DOE AJA, what will you do if LIHEAP continues to be delayed?
So,
Yeah, Megan.
yeah.
Sorry. No, go for it, EJ. Thank you.
Just wanting to touch on braiding and also with some of the different funding sources. One thing that's really important is getting to know your state staff and advocating for yourselves. I will say in Colorado, EOC has 0 DOE dollars this year because we can. DOE has to approve every single one of our projects individually. It adds at least 3 months onto our process, and it takes time. We don't have IIJA at all because we would have to abide by Davis-Bacon, and contractor amounts in Colorado are enormous for just kind of standard payment because of how high the cost of living is. And so we were able over the past couple of years to really talk to our state staff and say, hey, this isn't working for us. This is really difficult. If we could just have state funds and LIHEAP funds, that would be great. Now, I'm not sure why anybody else's LIHEAP's delayed because ours isn't. And so I guess that is on a state by state basis at this point. But we do braid a lot of state funds with LIHEAP. We used over $200,000 in utility funds last year, and we were lucky that the other half of our team at EOC is our multifamily utility team. So we work with them every single day on that. And then we also, one thing that you don't necessarily have with single family is owner contribution. And so when you have multifamily, you can advocate, there are going to be places, not homes, but buildings that are HUD or USDA, and they're not going to have a lot of money. They're going to be run by nonprofits, but there are other ones that are run by counties. And we had one of our counties give almost $200,000 last year on a project. And so you really have to see what's out there. I know a representative from another subgrantee, she writes separate grants to get $20,000 or even $2,000 here or there to be able to braid it in. So I think it's really good to know your state staff and what you're allowed to do, advocate for what you want. And just be as creative as possible. don't get too creative. We did have one job where it was 6 buildings and I braided funds on every building and used 5 different funding sources. And it was the biggest nightmare to close in the world. And I wanted to cry. So also be realistic with what you want to do and don't expect future you to be able to put up with past you.
That's some sage wisdom to close this up. I will mention briefly with NCAP we are working on putting together a series on leveraged funding that could come out that could start as early as December 9th. Still a work in progress. And I just want to take a moment before I turn it over to Keisha and Derek. Thank you to the panelists. You guys have been amazing, and thank you for jumping on in relatively short order and working with us to put this together. I also want to say thank you to Jessie for helping us keep track of notes, and her reports at the end of these sessions really help to analyze what's going well, what could be better. Thank you to NCAP. Couldn't have done this without you guys. It's been an honor, privilege to put this together, and thank you to DOE for funding this series. Keisha, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chase. I just want to my turn to thank everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us and being part of the 6-part multifamily weatherization series together. We have covered the full picture of multifamily work from planning, coordination, communication, compliance, and closeout. So each session has shown how much stronger we are when we learn from one another. This series has reminded us that multifamily weatherization isn't just about improving buildings, it's about building partnerships, people, and systems that last. So once again, we'll be following up with a recording and slides so you can revisit or share what we've covered today. And on behalf of NCAP, Greenbound Consulting, and all of our panelists, I want to thank you so much for your time, your insight, and your ongoing communication to weatherization. So keep learning, keep smiling, keep connecting, and hopefully I will see you at the next NCAP session. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you all.